So potty training, although we think the myth is it could happen in 3 days, it can't. It really is a process, and it's a process that we have to be there to support our child through the entire span of that part of development. It's really important that when our kids are little, we build this way of understanding their nonverbal communication to start. And that's how we kind of can gauge when our kids start to be ready for big milestones, how we can gauge if they're feeling uncomfortable or comfortable, if they're excited or if they're afraid. We need to learn our child's individual body cues first. And as a
Uh-huh.
parent, once we've mastered that, then we can really go on to other things. So I always say a child's really not ready for potty training until they can fully pull up and down their pants by themselves.
Hello, welcome back to Family Man Entrepreneurs. I am here with Joanna Flora. She is the owner of Puzzled Parents and works in a very interesting niche, which is potty training. And she does parent coaching. She works with a potty training protocol. And I'm really, really looking forward to having this conversation with her about, obviously, potty training and parenting, dads, how dads could be involved in potty training, how dads could be involved with their family in a very, very healthy way, and specifically their daughters. She has a history in art therapy, and it'll be a very interesting conversation to see how we can include art therapy or art in general in the conversation about therapy, about parenting, sorry. So, welcome, Joanna. Nice to see you here. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I think we're going to cover so much stuff that isn't talked about normally.
Absolutely. I can't wait. So, the first question is maybe an obvious one, but how did you decide to focus on potty training?
So, I'm traditionally a therapist. I own a group practice for children and families, and I'm an art therapist by trade. And over time, I really recognized these patterns where children weren't mastering the potty training process. They weren't becoming potty independent. They were having a lot of mental health challenges that were stemming from inadequate potty training, leading to things such as obesity, smearing of feces, ill proper cleaning and poor hygiene habits. And a lot of these things, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. So I was like, how can we really address this? And I decided we really got to nip it in the bud. We really got to nip the challenges from the get go when our kids are little. So that's kind of how I just dove in and I created this program to support families as best as possible.
Oh, I love that. And probably the next obvious question is what would be the right way to potty train?
Great question. So, children are all very individualized. So, there's no perfect way to potty train anybody. We really have to meet our child where they're at, and we really have to know how to communicate and how to read our child. So, I think for dads, I think it's really hard for us to sometimes recognize what our child wants, especially sometimes the moms tend to be more dominant in this place and we're like, I don't know. How do I do it? So it's really important that when our kids are little, we build this way of understanding their nonverbal communication to start. And that's how we kind of can gauge when our kids start to be ready for big milestones, how we can gauge if they're feeling uncomfortable or comfortable, if they're excited or if they're afraid. We need to learn our child's individual body cues first. And as a
Uh-huh.
parent, once we've mastered that, then we can really go on to other things. So I always say a child's really not ready for potty training until they can fully pull up and down their pants by themselves. So, yes, that they can start peeing on the potty and doing other things, but we call that pre potty training, something that people don't normally talk about. But those are the pre potty training skills. So usually a child doesn't have the dexterity or the muscle tone to really pull up and down their pants until they're about 2.5, 3 years old. And even still, they won't be potty independent until they're 4 or 5 years old because they actually don't have the arm span to wipe independently. So potty training, although we think the myth is it could happen in 3 days, it can't. It really is a process, and it's a process that we have to be there to support our child through the entire span of that part of
Mhm.
development.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that all makes perfect sense. And what are some of these? What are some of the mistakes, just to call them in that, you see parents make that have a lasting influence on their kids?
Great question. So, a lot of what happens with potty training and all developmental milestones really is something we call transference of feelings. So, as a parent, a lot of the time we feel anxious or overwhelmed or freaked out or just irritated and angry with accidents or potty training. I mean, I got irritated yesterday. We were out for brunch and my son had peed through his pants. And I was like, oh no, like I have to carry him soaking wet through this crowded restaurant to go change him. Like, I'm sure my own feelings then transferred onto my son because then he was giving me a hard time. He was wiggling. He really didn't want to go change, and I instantly recognized it in myself. And I said, hey, we're going to hold hands and we're going to skip all the way to the bathroom. So I changed my own internal feelings, flipped it and made it a positive thing. And then we had fun getting to the bathroom. So what happens is feelings transfer. They're just like kind of being sick and throwing up, right? If I'm sick and I'm throwing up, the person who's helping care for me is going to feel sick and throwing up. So it's the same exact thing with feelings. So as parents, we really have to be in check with our own feelings before we go and start parenting things or to dive into those challenges. So I always say, if you need to go to the bathroom and wash your face before you dive into a big challenging parenting situation, like go and do that because you can't take back. And they have memories of elephants. These kiddos.
Oh, parenting is definitely a very, very good way to get in touch with your triggers and exactly what frustrates you. And it's such a wonderful opportunity, as you said, like to ask why. Like, why am I, like, why? Am I
Why?
worried that other people are looking at me? Like, why am I embarrassed for such a normal thing that's, the kid is obviously distressed because he or she doesn't want to be in that situation, then feel like they've done something wrong, even if it's something they can't help. So it's thank you for sharing that perspective. That's been very, very helpful.
And there's like this taboo that goes along with pee and poop and farting and all these
Yeah.
bodily functions that we don't
Yeah.
really talk about it.
Uh-huh.
And no wonder our kiddos are like have these shame thoughts about potty training and all these bowel movements because it's like a societal norm to have
Mhm.
this taboo. We really want to normalize it so that it doesn't have to be this fight to
Mhm.
go to the potty and to we really want to make it fun and engaging. That's
Mhm.
how we're going to actually get our kids to be successful.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very, very good point. And I mean, obviously the parents do it like they do everything in the best way that they know how to, and they can do it at the time of actually doing it. Like most of the time, there won't be any ill will on how they potty train their kid, even if it ends up having a slightly bad effect on the kid later on. But everybody's doing it in the way that they think is best with the knowledge and tools they have available at the time of doing it. So, but what are some of these consequences that you see from potty training that has gone maybe not as playful or as fun as it could have gone?
Yeah. So unfortunately, a lot of kids actually are constipated when we are doing the potty training process. So toddler diets are awful. They're very picky eaters. A lot of them tend to be very carb based or very sugar
Mhm.
based. And that adds to stools to be either very hard or very mushy and liquidy. And actually, a lot of people don't know this, but diarrhea is even a form of constipation because we have blocked stool and then the liquid comes in and is able to move around the stool.
Mm.
So we really
Mm.
want to pay attention to our child's bowel movements because when a child is constipated, it really is hard to go to the bathroom and it really is hard to have a routine. It's hard to be regular and it's actually hard physically for them to push to go to the bathroom. So what happens is our kids are constipated. We're not recognizing the signs as parents, and then we're forcing them to go to the bathroom and that can or sit on the potty, right? And that can cause one, it can cause trauma. It can cause significant regression because now our kids are afraid to go to the potty. Um, but also long term, it adds a lot of other effects because if we don't address these issues when they're younger, their body starts to get used to this constipation and thinks that it's kind of normal and these blockages are normal. Well, our body can hold up to 15 pounds or more of old poop in it. So actually, it leads to things like obesity and severe gut issues. And then we have gut brain fog, and then we have behavioral issues that stem from it. So, we're really talking about the gut being the second brain right now in society. And it's really true. There's more neurons in our gut than in our brain. So if we are full of stool and we're backed up, or forgive me for cursing, but if our bellies are full of shit, our brain feels like it's full of shit. So we really have to make sure that our gut and our brain and our bellies are doing what they need to do for little kids so that their brains can feel like they're cleared to do what they need to do.
Yes, that's a very interesting point. To be honest, I didn't consider that constipation was such a massive issue. Obviously, toddlers are notoriously picky eaters, and I don't want to deviate too much from the subject, but is there anything that you've seen that parents can do to make to improve the diet of their toddler if they are picky eaters?
Yeah. So multivitamins and vitamins like probiotics are really important. Always check with your pediatrician to make sure you're doing the right type of vitamin for your child, and based on the nutrition that they have is what they need. You can also consult with a nutritionist to make sure too. But I highly recommend any foods that start with a P, the letter
Mm-hmm.
P, like plums, peaches, pears, peas.
Mm.
Those tend to be really good foods in helping the gut process and go through the system.
Mm-hmm.
But then our white foods or our yellow foods tend to really be foods that bind us up. And there's a lot of myths out there about these foods. But apples and bananas actually bind us up. A lot of people tend to think that they help us go to the bathroom because they have high fiber, but they don't. They tend to bind us up. So those white foods and those yellow foods that are very fair in color, we want to avoid those foods if we're seeing some constipation issues.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's very good to know. Another thing I learned today. That's what.
You right?
Good to know.
Toddler language.
Yeah. So, what would be a fun way to introduce these foods, the pea foods, in case you do see that with some constipation with the toddlers?
So smoothies, I think, are always the best way because toddlers don't actually sit and eat. If you have a
Mhm.
toddler who sits and eats, like consider yourself lucky and you got the golden ticket. Because most toddlers are up playing and eating, or
Mhm.
they'll sit for a little bit and then they gotta go, or their attention span really is about 3 minutes at a maximum. And if you can get really more than 3 minutes of them sitting, like you are golden. But a lot of toddlers don't have that, and it's really unfair for us to even ask for that because they're just not capable. So really smoothies are a great way because they're drinking as they go. They can drink
Mhm.
it over a long period of time and it's not going to go bad. It's a great morning kind of snack or after a nap snack. They also are really filling, and you can make it kind of fun by incorporating yogurt or ice cream, and you can also play it off as being more of an ice cream. You can also blend all of that stuff together and then freeze it in the ice pop molds. And kids think they are an ice pop and they love it that way.
That's another very, very good tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Think parents should definitely try
Yeah.
that. Give it a go. Um, Going back to the potty training, what are some ways that dads can be a bit more involved?
I'm so excited to talk about this because a lot of dads don't play a big role in potty training. Especially our entrepreneurial dads, they're working all the time. We don't really think about these things. So, the first step that a dad can really play in supporting the potty training process is to just move diaper changes into the bathroom. So, what that really does is that normalizes being in the bathroom, and we want to make the bathroom fun. So, if you're brushing your teeth, have your kiddo come in with you and brush their teeth in the bathroom. We want the bathroom to be a place to hang out. We want it to be fun. We want it to be cool. If your kiddo's taking a bath, go hang and sit with them in the bathtub. Make the bathroom a cool bonding location for the two of you to be. Also, if you're going to the bathroom, take your kiddo with you. So if they're a little girl, they're not going to pee standing up, but the girls tend to pick up on that really quickly. Little boys get a little confused because they're like, do I start to pee standing up? Do I want to sit down
Mhm.
like mom? Because they get to see mom pee a little bit more frequently. And what we want to do is teach them that whichever one feels more comfortable for them, they can try. So if you want them to go to the bathroom on a big toilet, we want to make sure that they're on a stool where they are sturdy and they feel safe and secure. If not, let's have them pee on a floor potty or then have them sit on their potty seat and just normalize that they can pee sitting down. But we want to make it fun to let them see you pee. So if you're going to pee, then let them flush for you. Then make washing your hands something that you both do together. We want to make the bathroom a fun place to even just have bathroom parties or sing a fun song. Really normalize the time in the bathroom, that it's not scary, it's not a punishment, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a cool place to hang out.
I love that. I love that you think about things just to make them really fun as well. I think a lot of parents can, especially when they're already stressed, you got so many things to do at work and the house, or you've got other friends and family stresses, and that's just normal. That's just daily life. So sometimes that seriousness can seep into parenthood and daily life with the kids as well. Well, actually, what they need is, your lightheartedness, your emotional stability, put it that way, just to have that constant and that reliability, and to build that safety in them, right? So I love
Yep.
that you bring it up in such a way that it should just be fun. Like
Fun.
we take things way too seriously.
And, I think as children and knowing really how kids
Uh-huh.
react to their parents, they're more likely to give mom a hard time than they are dad. So potty training is already something that we want to give a hard time on as a toddler. So the fact that dad's making it fun and dad's
Uh-huh.
approving of it is even more reason why dads should really jump on teaching these skills. And it could be super cool, to be honest. You could be like, do you want to see a magic trick? And fill the toilet bowl with blue food coloring, like 3 or 4 drops. You go
Okay.
pee, and it magically changes color. Like, the kids think this
Yeah.
is the coolest. Even throwing goldfish
Yeah.
into the little crackers, the goldfish crackers
Uh-huh.
into the toilet bowl, just seeing if you can make it and flushing them down the toilet and saying goodbye to the fishies. Kids love that kind of stuff, and then it really normalizes it and it makes it cool. And
Uh-huh.
it's even cooler because it's something that I get to do with my dad.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. That's very just finding games and the singing, as you mentioned before, and yeah, just normalize it, and that's such a fun way of interacting with your child, and it just builds a relationship, and it builds safety for them.
Exactly.
They just feel they can come in, and it's not these heavy emotions of something that shouldn't have these heavy emotions, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just wondering, are do you ever get parents that come to you the question like how I presume they get a lot of pressure from their families. Well, I can, I lived in some countries where life is quite traditional, and like there's a set way of doing things, and there's often like the grandmother or especially the grandmother in this case with potty training, that would be like, you have to do it this way. You have to, oh, he's so many years old, he still hasn't been potty trained. Shame on you. What will other people think of you? And have you had parents come to you with these difficulties?
Yes, actually, it's kind of incredible. So, internationally, we see a really different age frame of potty training. So, in our more Asian cultures, we see potty training start happening a lot younger. And that's usually because there's more people living within the family home. And supposedly, I haven't actually tested out the brands, but from what I've heard, those diapers aren't as absorbent. Where when you transition to more European and American cultures, we tend to have less family accessible to us, and our diapers tend to be more absorbent. So it's easier to potty train later in life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, really, what happens is the potty training process can be really long. And I think a lot of parents who are also dual working families get really stressed out and overwhelmed with potty training. So I think what really is the most effective in Met cultures and more European cultures, when we have those two parents who are actually working, is if we wait a little bit longer so our kids are a little bit more independent in the process and have the ability to be a little bit more independent than forcing it on so young, because it doesn't hold so much mental capacity for parents. And we really have to think, if we're a parent who is working, and then we have childcare, and then we have, potty training and all things toddler. Where can we give a little and give back a little so that it's a balance? Because we don't want to put all of our energy into potty training and then not have any family time or not have any bonding time or not have any self-care time. So it's really a balancing act. And at the end of the day, we have to do what's in the best interest of each and individual family and their family dynamics. But you see a huge cultural discrepancy across the board from culture to culture. But really, it's the function. What's the
Yeah.
function and why is this happening? And how many supports are there to help with potty training process? With that being said, a lot of people won't utilize potty training coaching, which is my job per se, because of this taboo, especially because they're getting pressure from the mother-in-law or their own mother. My kids were potty trained at 2, or my kids were potty trained at 1.5. Society's really changed. The demands on families have really changed, and we have to take that into consideration. But if your child had diabetes, you would be at the endocrinologist. You would be getting as much diabetic support as possible. If your child was struggling with speech and language therapy, you would be getting a speech and language pathologist in your family immediately. So it's the same thing with potty training and mental health stuff. If your kid's struggling with potty training, just reach out for some coaching. It's not a big deal. We have to get rid of this taboo. There's experts here to help you, and they're here to help you because it's an issue for a lot of families. You're not alone.
Yeah. 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 No, that's definitely something that parents should take into account. And I love how you normalize that because it should be the same with, with everything. You go, how you have an issue and you investigate and you ask for help. And it's definitely something also in maybe more Western cultures that sometimes we're a bit, we have to do things on our own and we don't have to, don't reach out to other people, but we actually should. So that's definitely a very important point you made there. And you also work with parents in terms of parent coaching. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So
Yes.
I do a lot of parent coaching. And it's not just, sorry, my computer is dying. So we're just going to plug this in. I thought it was plugged in,
No
and it
worries.
turns out I do a lot of parent coaching, and a lot of parents don't realize they actually need coaching until their child comes in for therapy. And then they realize, oh, it's not my child, it's my parenting.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that. So, as you've got quite a lot of experience with this, what is one challenge that you keep seeing parents struggle with? So they come to you, and one parent after another parent with this particular challenge. Is there something you can identify?
I think there's a few, but I think the biggest are separation anxiety, like especially in the little ones, like their children have a really hard time separating from the parent and they get overwhelmed and that kind of thing. They don't know. And the parents tend to kind of give in to a lot of what the child is demanding. And then that also builds then the separation anxiety component and the child's need for control. So that's a huge one. We also see a lot of kids who struggle with motivation. This new generation is really attached to electronics. We see kids as young as 1 or 2 playing on tablets and things like that. And as well as they have a function, they also change our brain development. And that really impacts our level of motivation because the games on tablets come with like sounds and songs that cause all of these reinforcers that our children then, when it comes to doing simple things like chores or eating dinner or brushing our teeth, don't get a lot of reinforcement, then they don't want to do those things. So that's part of why I'm so animated with potty training, because I have to have a lot of animation because I'm competing against these video games who also give so much animation and praise for little things. So if I'm not animated, they're not going to want to hang out with me. They're going to want to be on their tablet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my God, the tablets and all of that. Yeah, it definitely changes the brain chemistry. You can see that, and it's amazing that these very very small kids, how early sometimes they get introduced to these appliances, and how it affects their, especially when it comes to separating from the appliance as well, right? If they have
Mhm.
to, at the end of the day, when it's bedtime and preparing for bedtime, some kids really really struggle to to
Sure.
give up that appliance. Yeah. So how what would be a good way for parents to regulate the use of this appliance when it comes to like a healthy way of, so they want to have the benefits of it, but they don't want the kid to be too affected by it. So what's the one way they could find that balance?
So it's a complete balancing act. And I'm an entrepreneur myself. I have this group practice, I'm a potty training coach. So it's really sometimes we have to rely on these things so we can do our jobs, so we can function, so we can empty the dishwasher and not have somebody running and grabbing the knives, right? So these things hold practicality in our lives, but we really have to figure out how frequently we're allowing our child to use it. What are they actually having access to? Is there an educational component to it? Is it just for fun? And how many hours are we giving them access to this all the time? Now, I know in a lot of the colder locations, it's a lot harder to limit this because what do we do with our kids when it's freezing outside? But that's definitely a give and a take. I know in our household, electronic use goes up more in the winter because it's dark outside. We have a lot of cold weather. We have a lot of crazy animals outside when we can't see at night. So I don't want my kiddo outside, but in the summertime, if we can stay out till 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, that is where I want us to be. And I want us away from electronics. So I think it's a balancing act. And I think we have to realize the electronics cannot be a babysitter. It can be a short-term babysitter when it comes to safety issues, like emptying the dishwasher, right? That's a big thing for me in my morning routine. Every morning I have to empty the dishwasher and I don't want little hands going for those knives or anything sharp. So, of course, we are sitting and we are occupied with something else. So we don't even go near that dishwasher. But other chores like the washing machine, I ask for help and I overpraise for help. So there's things that I can have my toddler do with me that I normally would really much rather do independently because it's faster. But now I'm teaching him a skill and he can help me. He can't reach all the buttons, but he loves that I pick him up. He loves the sounds of the washing machine because it's, again, an electronic that makes beeping and praising noises. And he can help me switch the wash over to the dryer. He helps me measure and pour. He helps me pour it in. He throws in the dryer balls. He loves balls. So chucking the dryer balls is his favorite thing. And then he gets to turn it on. And of course, it gives more noise. The dryer gives more noises. And it's like this praise. And then he's proud of himself when he's done. So he's clapping. He's cheering himself on. I did it. So we have to figure out how we can incorporate teaching our children how to do chores in a safe way and not making it about, oh, let me use this electronic to babysit them, unless it's a safety issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's, my God, it's quite a balancing act with everything, right? So we were changing from from a traditional way of, this is how you parent, to a bit like the Wild West in a way, where you just have to find their own feet and everybody does it differently. And so it's very good that there are coaches like you, and there's so many resources nowadays more focused on parenting. And we see quite a change. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen from parenting, let's say 20 or 30 years ago with nowadays?
It's definitely electronics.
Mhm.
Especially with teenagers right now, limiting and having control over their electronics is a big issue because it's a safety issue, right? So,
Mhm.
especially our children who play sports or have extra after school activities or are driving, we really want them to have access to cell phones and ways for us to track their location or to make sure that they can ask for help when needed. A lot of places don't even have cash anymore where we can exchange or purchase things. They're using Apple Pay or their phones to pay for things, like school lunches, which is kind of crazy to me. It still blows my mind. But we have to have these tools because of the society we're living in. But how can we limit that so we're not addicted to social media? Because that really impacts our self esteem and who we
Yeah.
are, our identity as people, right? So how can we turn it so that it's positive things and not negative things? There's a lot of apps that are really parent friendly that we can just turn off all certain apps except for access to like messenger and phone calls. And you can also turn off who they're able to call throughout the school day or at times of night. I also highly recommend that we turn off the internet in our house at a certain time. So Granted, weekends, we might want it a little bit later, but during the week, I think we really want like the internet to go off a good half hour, 45 minutes before bedtime. And I get
Hmm.
kids have papers, they have tons of homework, they did sports, so they're up late working too. But at what point does that homework need to stop and
Hmm.
just not get done? And when is it okay for us to say it's okay if it doesn't get done as parents? Because we know the workload tends to be a little unrealistic. So as a parent, it's okay for us to, you know, go over the school's head and say, like, listen, we weren't able to get this done. My kid needs 8 hours of sleep.
I love how you mention that because it is really such a game changer, and it's important. You know, they have to know what the balance is, and it's a very good idea, by the way, to have switch the internet off sometime before bedtime. They really, really need to slow down and interact with humans, and you can't just go from the computer all the way to bed and expect them to have a good night's rest.
It's impossible. Our brains aren't capable. One strategy I actually do for myself is when we're having family time, the ping or the vibration on my watch or will really wake me up or like get my attention. And then I disconnect from my family where that's where I want to be. So I've been putting my phone on airplane mode.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely helps.
It goes off. No one can get a hold of me from, that 7:30 time to that 9:30 time. And that's okay. That's my family time.
Oh yeah, yeah. And what you were mentioning before about social media and all that, that's a whole conversation. Another uh, 20 podcast episodes. But a lot of what you're talking about is like how to effectively build the relationship, a positive relationship with your children. And I wanted to ask specifically for dads, like in your experience, what did you see with parenting coaching? What is something that some best practices dads can implement to really build that relationship with their children?
I love this. So, teach dads. I work with a lot of dads, especially first responder dads, because they have a really crazy schedule. First responder dads tend to get called out. They miss a lot of
Hmm.
holidays where traditionally children expect dads to be home for holidays and be disconnected from work. Those first responder families really miss out on that. And I think really entrepreneur families miss out on that too because as an entrepreneur, we're always working and it's really hard. We don't really know how to turn off. So that's one of the things I really suggest is coming up with times that are dates with the dad, whether it's just, every Friday you bring them to school instead of them taking the bus and you stop and get a donut or a bagel or a pastry. Making time that is predictable and routine that they know they're going to have that time with you. It doesn't have to be anything crazy or over the top. It could be, every Saturday morning we go for a walk with dad. Or so they know that those are times that if they have to talk with you about something, they know you're already there and they're going to have that time to talk and open up and be vulnerable with you. I also suggest if you're running errands, have them come with you and start that at a really young age. If you try to start it when they're a teenager, they're not going to want to. But if you start it when they're little and you're like, come on, we're going to go to Home Depot and we're going to go here and we're going to go there, maybe we'll get you a little treat along the way. Or we're going to go to the car wash. What little toddler doesn't love the car wash with the lights and the bubbles and all of that kind of stuff? So pairing errands and things you have to get done with fun stuff with dad is a great way that they can build those relationships, those trust, and the communication. Um, the other thing I always try to explain to dads is dads are big in eye contact and they really love eye contact from their children. But eye contact for children, especially children who are already overstimulated by all the other things, is really hard. So I think the car is a great place to have conversations that have meaning because we don't have to make that eye contact, but we are fully listening. And it's a really great place to take the stress off of the conversation, but really make it kind of fun and a place that feels safe is in the car because it's not going out of that car. So I highly recommend that to dads. And then another big, big thing I really highlight with my dads, especially my dads of little girls, is to really show what a relationship should look like. Because in a world where the divorce rate is through the roof, There are actually more divorced families, I feel like, right now than there are married families. Girls don't know what to look for in a spouse. And that's really sad. And they have this idea of Prince Charming, but once you hit out of that fantasy stage, you realize Prince Charming's not real and I'm going to have to settle for something. So, what am I settling for? What should be expected of a partner? So, the better of a partner you are, the higher expectations your child has for a partner. And that's what they're going to look for. So, really, you have to be a great husband, a great partner to really model that for your daughters about what they want. And you really want to treat your daughters that you're listening. Don't pretend you're doing something else. Don't invalidate their feelings. Be really present because then they're going to look for somebody who's really present with them as a spouse.
Mhm.
It's the same thing for guys, but that on that mother factor.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of a another podcast I did, which was very focused on raising boys. So could you tell me a bit of the difference between what you've seen of daughters and sons? Like how would they focus on daughters that would be slightly different than focusing on sons?
So with daughters, we really want to let them know that it's okay for them to have emotions because they are at a different level, right? The brain structure between girls and boys is very different. So the girls, their middle of their brain, it's called the corpus callosum, is a lot thinner. And that's why they say women can multitask because the neurons can go through faster back and forth, right? So girls, their feelings and their thoughts tend to bounce around and go faster through the brain. So it's really important that dads can validate their daughter's feelings, listen to those feelings, and really be present in those feelings because
Hmm.
that's what they are going to then recognize that that's what they need to look for in a spouse. Where
Hmm.
boys, on the other hand, you can pick one task or one activity and really bond over that, and they feel fully nurtured. So we don't want to pick 10 tasks. We want to pick one. So if you're going snowboarding that day, go
Hmm.
snowboarding that day. If you're building a saw out of wood that day, build the saw out of wood that day. We don't need to be doing a ton of things. We don't need a lot of conversation. A lot of it is more behavioral and modeled behavior and just being. Where with girls, it's that emotional connection that they really need.
That's definitely a big difference, and it's a very very good incentive for dads in general to kind of get in touch with their own feelings in that way, and they get kind of pushed and triggered into that anyway. But it's such a good learning, because obviously that's again another 20 podcasts about men and being in touch with their own feelings. But having a daughter definitely brings that out, or at least gives you the opportunity to investigate yourself and try and bring that out for yourself. Yeah, that's such an interesting part. So another question I wanted to ask you was about art therapy, well, art in general, and how art or playfulness or how that could have a positive effect, or how can you incorporate that in your parenting strategy?
I love that. So, play is actually how our brain first processes any information. So, when it comes to potty training or anything little, before we want to introduce it, we want to introduce it in play. So, we can have our stuffies going potty. We can have our stuffies, going on the bus for the first time. We can do all those things with play. My son, he's big into his stuffies, but he's also big into trucks. So we were having the trucks fighting it out the other day. And then I had all of a sudden the one truck goes, I'm sorry. And my son was like, oh, don't be sorry. I was just like, he was able to then engage in that play right back with me. And he was able to say, like, we were just joking. It wasn't mean. Like, he was able to dialogue, and he's only 2.5. So he's able to take these conversations in his mind when we do it via play, but he can't do it in real life yet. So play is the first learning spot. And that's a great thing to start with our little ones and our toddlers. And then as our kids get older, play kind of stops to a little bit of actually a big extent. We can always joke around and get in that level, but art tends to be a better place to let that kind of come out, or sports, right? So sports is a great way, gardening is a great way, but art is a great way. So connect with your kids by getting messy. Go
Mhm.
do some tie dye outside, or do some chalk in the driveway, or just make paint, get canvases and paint outside, or have a great day
Hmm.
doing things with art because art materials and art mediums allow you to express yourselves in ways that you normally wouldn't. So
Hmm.
even if it's not therapy, it's a way to get things out and then just talk about the art. Like, oh, what made you even make that? Or what is like, that's really cool. It's super different. I've never seen anything like that before. And just use it as a way to have a conversation with your kids. A lot of kids nowadays aren't talking to their parents.
Hmm.
So the more you can do this, the more your kids will talk to you as they get older, the better off they're going to be in the long run.
Hmm. Yeah. Would you say that would also work for older kids or even teenagers?
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder to just start this off the bat with teenagers because if teenagers are smart, if you've never been a part of their life and then all of a sudden you're like, let's hang out, they're going to be like, what's the catch? What do you want? They're guarded. They're like,
Hmm.
nah, no thanks. Like, especially if you're an unreliable parent. If you say, I'm going to make it to your softball game, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there, and you're not, they learn patterns and behaviors. Kids are very aware. They have, like I've said, they have these memories like elephants. They remember these things. So if you make a promise and you don't keep it, they will remember that. So we really have to, if we say we're going to do something as a parent, we really have to follow through. And we really need to be predictable in our kids' lives.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's so important to have that consistency, and I'm not surprised you work a lot with first responders. If your schedule is that hectic, it's really hard to, and entrepreneurs as well, obviously, because there's so many different things. You got different clients. It's really hard to sometimes find that balance between where do I just switch off? Obviously, first responders have that. You can't just say no, just I'm not going to drive the ambulance now. I'm having dinner. But if you have that choice? What are some ways you can find that balance between work and what are some ways you can just mentally switch off from work and be present with your kids? Because if you're physically present but not mentally present, it's very often sort of like you're not even there. If you're just on your phone or you're doing something else or you're thinking about something else, what are some ways parents, especially dads, can just switch off from work?
I love this because so many people struggle with this and we will not normalize this. So I actually had to do this for myself and I have implemented this with a lot of dads who work as much as I do and they have seen huge success. So I made it a rule. This was probably about 7 years ago. In our family, every quarter we have to do a trip, whether it's a 3 night overnight trip or it's a long vacation, we need time to reset as a family. And this was even before kids. But now that we have kids, it's even more important that we do this. And we set that time aside and we make sure that we are away. So these ideas of the staycations are really, it's a great concept and it's a great idea, I think, when that's all we can afford. But the problem
Hmm.
with the staycation is you're like, oh, I'm just going to fix this wall, or oh, this has been bothering me, I'm going to clean it, or oh, I just have to throw in a load of laundry. And then it doesn't become this time where we're actually bonded. We just fall back into our routines and we don't feel rested and connected at the end of it. So whether it's you're just going camping, here in New Jersey, all the state parks are free to go camping or very low fee and very, very low fee. So there's no reason why you can't just get out there and go camping for the weekend and enjoy and reconnect with your family. And in fact, you're probably, if you're camping, you're not going out to dinner, you're probably eating sandwiches and even saving money for most of us. So I think even just planning that time to be out of your home, out of your normal environment, and in a new place every single quarter is key. Also, I think the week of the holidays, whether you can or can't based off your schedule, if you can take off a chunk of time to just reset, I think that really helps families just regroup and regroove as to where they need to be. And it doesn't mean you don't have to work. You can still work, but how can we reframe those days? Are your days shorter? Are you not working on anything work related and just coming up with the calendar and your goals for the year? How can you disconnect from your employees? Because your employees are probably taking time off. So that's a great time for you to kind of disconnect from all of them and also encourage them to reconnect with their families as well. So, what are you doing to bond in terms of time? And what are you doing to set those boundaries where you're not connected to the rest of the world and your normal place of living?
Hmm. That is a very, very good point. And even if it's not camping, just like a day trip would
I
make a difference as well. Like going out for just make a picnic somewhere, especially now in summer. Thinking of winter, where you could do it in winter, I'm not quite sure, but
You can
there's
go
always,
skiing or tubing, or
yeah.
it's key to get out of your home environment
Hmm.
because so many people try this and they try to stay home and it
Hmm.
crumbles in their faces. And I just hate seeing people put so much time and effort and then feel super unsatisfied by that strategy at the end. They feel hopeless.
Hmm.
Um, and their kids don't really appreciate it at the end of the day. So just get out of that home environment. I
Hmm.
know we want to make it like a day where and if you are going to have to stay home, then turn off the phones and hide them, put them in your car trunk, and they're gone.
Very good advice for the weekends,
Mm.
definitely. Whenever you can do it, just even if it's an afternoon, that it makes all the difference.
Yep. 2 hours
Yeah.
a day makes a lifetime of difference for our kids.
Hmm. Yeah, just sitting together, doing something non-phone related, like a puzzle,
Mhm.
or as you say, art, or just getting outside and just running around, chasing each other. There's so many options.
Yep.
So thank you so much for sharing your advice. Where can people find you?
Great question. You can find me at thepuzzledparents.com or the puzzled parents on Instagram.
Hmm.
And then I also have a free Facebook community for all parents who are struggling with potty training, the Puzzle Parents Unite, the potty training edition. And that has tons of free trainings, guides, potty training charts, you name it, it's in there.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. I will put the links in the description under the YouTube video. So thank you so much for your time, and everybody has learned a lot, I can assure you. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.